topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for joining in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, Texas. If you've not met me yet and you don't know me, I'm a management consultant and organizational logotherapist specializing in meaning and purpose. My team and I help and equip companies to build vibrant, engaged, and high-performing cultures by activating meaning and purpose in them. And we work with forward-reaching organizations to develop inspirational leaders who create workplaces where people actually want to come to work and do their best. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at elisecortez.com. Also, if you like the content of the show, you may be interested in my next book coming out in March of 2023. It's called The Great Revitalization: How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. You can pre-order your copy at bookshop.org or go to Amazon. Now let's get into today's program. With us is Dr. Soren Kaplan, an affiliate at USC's Center for Effective Organizations. He's a serial entrepreneur, having founded 3 Silicon Valley startups, a columnist for Inc. magazine, and former corporate executive. He's the author of Experiential Intelligence, Harness the Power of Experience for Personal and Business Breakthroughs, which we will be talking about today. He joins us today from Bellingham, Washington. Dr. Kaplan, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you, Elise. Good to be here.
It's really great to have you. As we exchanged messages on LinkedIn, I think you're onto something here, Dr. Kaplan. I really like your work, and I think it's going to be really breakthrough for both the way we evaluate and hire people and develop individuals and teams and leaders. And so I really want to crack into it. You ready?
Let's dive in.
Okay. Well, let's first, if we can, let's just maybe get our listeners and viewers' attention here by sharing a little bit about just how you grew up. It's really quite extraordinary to get a bird's eye view into what it must have been like for a little guy to navigate that experience.
Yeah, I was a little guy. My parents actually were at Harvard University. My mother had grown up in India going to boarding school, and she was meditating with the monks in the Himalayas. My father grew up in New York, but was always kind of seeking purpose. So they met at Harvard, and they were studying philosophy and world religion, and they decided to drop out to find greater purpose. This was in the late 1960s. So as I was 6 months old, we were living with Ram Dass, also known as Richard Alpert. My parents were seekers. We kind of wound up kind of a funny story. They met a guy named Danny,
who
gave them a book from an Indian guru named Meher Baba. And Danny happened to be Daniel Goleman of experiential or of emotional intelligence. So when I was very young, though, we moved to California. My mother developed a mental illness when I was about 3 years old. And then my father was really kind of focusing in on his spiritual pursuits and had multiple jobs and was rarely home. Between the time I was 6 months old and had kind of become a teenager, about 15 years old, we had moved 16 times. So I by all kind of definitions of the term, I had sort of a traumatic upbringing. Now, the same things, however, as I kind of got in touch with and kind of had to address, a lot of the struggles and traumas that I had in various ways therapeutically, I also got in touch with the fact that those same experiences, like living with ambiguity and managing uncertainty and having to kind of make decisions at the last moment in my childhood, gave me certain gifts, like the ability to run startups and live with ambiguity, change organizational cultures, and kind of hedge bets and pivot new directions. And I realized over time that there's actually gifts that I got from those same experiences that traumatized me. And I also have realized that that's really what experience is. You can have big experiences and little experiences, and they shape you and give you, challenges you might need to overcome, but also gifts. And that's what experiential intelligence is all about.
Smashing summary, great way to start. So I like also the way that you orient to, and again, as you know, I read the book cover to cover and take copious notes. So I really like that you situate this. You say, so what happens to someone like me? You said, my life could have gone in any of three directions. One, I could have been completely overcome by my circumstances. Two, I could have gone through the motions of leading a normal life while blindly being led by inner scars. Or three, I could have found a way to tap into my, let's say, unique experiences to take command of my future. And you said for a long time, I did the second one really well, but now I do the third one with decent success. What I love about that, Soren, and as we corresponded, is I love that there's not a victim mentality in that. And there's growth, there's embrace, and there's that, as we said, the attitudinal stance that I talk about from being a logotherapist. And I know you are exposed to that. And you said you read Man's Search for Meaning at 15 or something like that, right? One of his, seminal books. But I really love that you give us access to whatever life does to us. And instead of being bowled over by that, you're teaching us and encouraging us to lean into those things and see what's there for us.
Absolutely. I had my own personal experiences, and all of this is also backed up by research too. I mean, there's a lot of research and work that's been done on this, but the idea that our experiences give us things to overcome, and the flip side of those things that we might need to address and overcome and heal from are also opportunities to look at them as things that instill strengths in us. So like I said in the quote you read, for a long time, I did number two really well. I kind of coped, and I used a lot of the strengths I gained kind of on automatic pilot a bit. I did a lot of things professionally that I looked kind of good on the outside, but on the inside, I was kind of not fully aware of my purpose and kind of the strengths that I was using. And so I have done a lot of work, and I've also kind of recognized that experiential intelligence sits within me and everyone else. And I was just, I've kind of just gone on a journey to harness it and lean into the strengths and find what makes me unique, so that I can then amplify that and kind of give it to the world through, this book and other things that I do.
Yeah, and I guess for me, the reason I found that so intriguing, Soren, is, being somebody who traffics in meaning and purpose, that's my whole jam, is, what I talk to audiences about and inside companies when I'm working on the culture is that because of just the unique person that you are, the unique path that you have walked, you have a unique lens on the world that only you can see. And through that lens, you can see possibilities and ways of addressing things that need addressing, problems, big, hairy issues in the world that no one else can see. And that's the opportunity. But what I also appreciate about your book, as I said to you, is not only do you teach us that this is a possibility, but then you've got a way to actually action this stuff, which we'll talk more about as we go along. But it's really beautiful how you've opened this path for us.
Well, I appreciate that. Experiential intelligence is really about how you think, your mindsets, which are your attitudes and beliefs, your abilities, which are your kind of higher order abilities, like living with uncertainty or ambiguity, or seeing patterns and a lot of data. And then you've got your knowledge and skills. And it's kind of like we all have our unique experiences. And so the question is, how do we tap into what our unique experiences have delivered to us in terms of our mindsets, abilities, and our know-how. And that's really what experience, it's very accessible is kind of what you're getting to. And I've been privileged enough to be able to look at my experiences and understand them in a way that I recognize that we all have experiential intelligences is all of our own unique internal fingerprints. And there's some practical ways in which we can access it. It's not rocket science.
Well, and then I also appreciate too that you've really got a system here, and I'm going to read again from your book, as I'm prone to do, because I just can't say the words better than you do. So you say, when we develop awareness of our strengths, lean into our assets. I love that. And move beyond the self-limiting beliefs that hold us back from fully embracing the whole spectrum of what we've gained from our unique experiences, we can tap into and apply a new type of intelligence in our lives, experiential intelligence. And this is the part that's important. The opportunity is to embrace our experiences, decipher them, and then use them to our advantage. I think the decipher part is really, really intriguing, is what most people probably really don't know how to do at all, which is another reason that I like your work so much.
Well, thank you. The whole notion that our experiences give us intelligence is kind of maybe new for some people, but maybe not. I mean, when you think about does your, how much of your IQ leads to your success in life? Well, it's actually probably not much. And then you think about emotional intelligence. That is important, understanding your own emotions and how you operate in others. But it's that experience that really is that combination of your mindsets, abilities, and know-how that make you, so that you can navigate this, kind of wild world that has a lot of, kind of change in it, and requires that you apply what you know in different contexts all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, now let's keep pulling back the onion layers, if you will, and let's give our listeners and viewers an understanding of what you mean by experiential intelligence. You have, 3 or 4 things that comprise experiential intelligence. Would you please tell us what they are?
Yeah. So experiential intelligence is, I really look at it as kind of this new lens that makes you unique. And I say you, but we're all just people. And so collections of people in teams and in organizations also have kind of collective experiential intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like what culture is created out of, and also your capabilities as a team and an organization. So when you think about what experiential intelligence is, it's really 3 components. I kind of listed them off before, but let's dive in a little bit. So they're your mindsets. So it's how you think. And what are mindsets? They're attitudes and beliefs about yourself, about other people, and about the world in general. And so your attitudes and beliefs can be things that hold you back, or things that propel you forward. And I can give examples of those, but the second one is your abilities. And so abilities are the things that really are your own personal competencies. And it's not about, kind of using, Microsoft Excel. It's really the higher order things that allow you to integrate what you know how to do, kind of that base knowledge and skills, with your overall experiences and your mindset, so that you can do new things. It's kind of that application, those higher order abilities. And then your know-how, which is your knowledge and skills. It's kind of the base kind of nuts and bolts of what you know how to do. But based on what you know how to do, when you tie that into a purposeful mindset that says, I want to be creative and do new things, and you then, connect that to those higher order abilities, that's where you have an opportunity to make a real change. And that applies to individuals and teams and organizations.
Mm. And where I got really excited too about this, Soren, is, in my books, I really, especially the ones for leaderships, I talk about go looking for your people, go looking for what's special and unique about them, marvelous about them, and find a way to get them to use that, to bring that. And I think your system really allows people to do that, gives a path for them to do that. And I appreciate that you really also then use the wonderful B word, breakthrough. So you talk about how when we use this stuff, we can transform ourselves, our teams, our organizations, and even our communities. And I think that that's so compelling. There's so much possibility in that.
Yeah, why would you want to get in touch with your experiential intelligence? It's really about making change for yourself, developing yourself, growing, as well as looking at what you care about, like you said, your purpose, and why are we here? To help other people. And if that's true, and experiential intelligence happens because we're all part of groups and social systems then the opportunity is to use one's experiential intelligence to kind of amplify what your strengths are inside to help others. And when you help others, you're usually creating experiences which then hopefully are positive, and then that helps other people grow their own experiential intelligence. It's kind of a nice feedback loop.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what I would hope for, and what I write about too, is I hope that it continues the ongoing elevation process of us all. There's another reason why I wanted to have you on the show. So on that note, let's take our first break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been talking with Dr. Soren Kaplan, who is the author of Experiential Intelligence, about his work, where it came from and such. After the break, we're going to get into how he teaches us how to discover experiential intelligence. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us. Before we get back to the program, I'd like to invite you to check out my first book that I put out, Purpose Ignited. I really wrote it for readers to awaken them to their passion and purpose and start them down the path of becoming an inspirational leader. So I hope you'll check that out. I use that as a basis for my leadership program called Vitally Inspired. If you're just now joining the program today, my guest is Dr. Soren Kaplan. He is a serial entrepreneur, having founded 3 Silicon Valley startups. He's also the author of Experiential Intelligence, Harness the Power of Experience for Personal and Business Breakthroughs, which we've been talking about today. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. So for this next part here, I want to get into, again, this one of the things that distinguishes your book so beautifully is it's very actionable. And you have all these worksheets and you've got PowerPoints and all these different things that you've given us to be able to come to and work through. So I really want to next take us into the art of discovering our XQ, by the way. This is how we describe experiential intelligence, our XQ. And I love how you say in your book, you say it's often by uncovering your assets that have been lying dormant that real breakthrough can happen. How exciting is that? That you could actually, listeners and viewers, leave this call at the end of this thing and discover something magnificent about yourself that's been lying dormant the whole time. So if we can, Soren, next, I want to talk through what you talk about in your book, in terms of experiences, mindsets, et cetera, so that we can give our listeners and viewers a snapshot into that process for themselves today. So do you walk us through it?
Yeah, thank you. So my view is that the big idea of experiential intelligence is only big if it's practical. And
I like it.
You got to do something with it. I'm going to bring this to life through some pretty simple examples because this stuff is actually pretty simple. The first is just a personal example. I grew up with a lot of challenges, but just some samples. I had one story in my life is that I was with my grandfather one time. He was a fashion designer in New York City. And so we were together, we were shopping for I think I was shopping for some flannel shirts, and he pointed out the flannel shirts that were kind of the no-named brands that were pretty inexpensive on the rack. And so I, looked at those, and he kind of was jokingly saying, if the label from over there were on these, we could, they would be charging 5 times as much for the same shirt. And I kind of, it was kind of like, I was probably 7 or 8 years old, but it stuck with me. Like, why would the name of something on a shirt command such a different price? And he was kind of, he was in the fashion world. So he was kind of scoffing a little bit about like consumer behavior and the psychology of it all. And that one little experience really kind of gave me some insight about like how the world works. And gave me some kind of motivation to learn about psychology and consumer behavior and kind of why do people buy things and why do people connect to brands. And, so that wasn't a traumatic experience at all. It was just kind of this experience I had that really shaped me. So, why am I bringing that up? Because the tools of looking at kind of getting in touch with your experiential intelligence and deciphering it are pretty simple. It's like, what are the experiences that you've had in life? And those can be the things that you remember. And some of them can be challenging and hard and, maybe traumatic possibly, but some of them might be very joyous and, you had a mentor and you learned something, whatever they are. What are the experiences? What did you internalize from those experiences? Okay, what are the beliefs you internalized? And like in my case, in that example, my belief was, wow, people operate very differently based on what they value. They might value a brand and they might pay for something, higher price. The abilities that you have, and then, so you have your experiences, the mindsets that you have, the abilities that you develop based on, kind of that trajectory, and then your know-how, which are your skills. So in that case, my know-how, I spent a lot of time doing market research and doing surveys and kind of understanding consumer behavior, but the abilities are really about, kind of the psychology of consumer behavior, understanding motivations, things like that. So I've got like these, that one experience I can kind of connect to my mindsets, my abilities, and my skill sets. And then I've applied that to, and I did a lot of innovation work in the past, and I've applied that to different things I've done. So, that is just one simple example. But, if you look at another example in my book is like, how do we all learn to ride a bike?
I love that, the way you did that. Yes.
Like, does it matter how high your IQ is to learn how to ride a bike? No, you need to do it from experience. And so, we have to practice something. We have to fall down. We have to get back up. We kind of learn how to do it over time. Now, when you think about your experiential intelligence in terms of riding a bike, there's the basic kind of knowledge and kind of the know-how, the skills. Like, I know how to brake, I know how to turn. But then there's the mindset of, well, how can I use this bike? I can use this bike to reduce stress, to get exercise, for transportation. And you actually have beliefs about the utility of that bike in your life. And then the abilities, like you might know how to brake and you might want to go on a tour of the countryside on this bike, but the abilities are like higher order. I know how to avoid, cars and anticipate the bumps that might knock me off. And so you've got these different levels of experiential intelligence just tied to just these everyday things. And so by understanding that framework and then mapping out, like, here's my experiences and here's, the beliefs, the abilities, the mindsets, abilities, and know-how, you can get a really quick snapshot of your own life, of what your assets and strengths are, how you think, and really get a good picture of yourself. It's like your own internal fingerprint again, as I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's powerful when you start to break this down, and then I think it's also really important too that we talk about and distinguish both the negative and positive kinds of experiences and impacts that we have. I thought the way that you do that in your book is very, very helpful for me, Soren, and that it helps me better delineate these kinds of experiences. So let's talk about the 4 kinds of impacts from experience that you talk about.
Yeah, thank you. The topic of trauma is really big today in terms of just being on everybody's radar. And I think a lot of the reason is because we have so many mental health challenges today after COVID and with social media and so forth. I like to talk about our experiences that we have. Of course, traumas are, can be very painful and people need to heal from them. And it can be, they're not advocating that we look at trauma in a positive light. What I'm going to share is a model to think about the things that have impacted us in life. So you can essentially have, what you might call a positive experience or a negative experience. And then you can look at those experiences as really a big impact or a little impact. So then, it's like a 2x2 matrix. So if you look at the big positive impacts, those would be like what I would call like a transformation. Like, in my case, I went to India after college and blew my mind. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is, we're talking early 1990s. There's not a lot of industrialization that has happened there. Not a lot of big brands are in there from the US and so forth. So it really challenged my notion of what's, kind of culturally real in the United States. I went to India. I really challenged the norms of kind of how I thought about life. I look at that as a big I, big impact, positive transformation. Flip side is the big negative impacts, which I would label as a trauma. So the things that are traumatic can impact us negatively, sure. And there's opportunities to look into them. And there's a term called post-traumatic growth.
Right.
Richard Tedeschi has, done a lot of work on that basically says if you have a trauma, you can, kind of come through it on the other side. And it really creates a shift in how you see the world, what's important to you, what you value, and your purpose. And so that's a big I, but on the negative side. Although I would say if you look at that in retrospect, sometimes you look at those negative things as maybe giving you gifts that turned into a positive, but it's sort of relative. And then you have the little stuff. So the little positive, eyes, positive thing that's little, I call it as an expander. It's a little positive thing that happened. That thing, my example I gave with my grandfather giving me insight into the consumer behavior, I look at it as a little positive eye. And then there's the little eyes that are negative that might kind of stick with you. That could be, things like, a parent, like my father, for example, didn't spend a lot of time with me. And I just have a lot of different little examples of him, like kind of deprioritizing time with me to do, his spiritual pursuits and other things. And I kind of developed a self-limiting belief that I wasn't kind of worthy of attention and focus. And I, I've had to deal with that. But those are the little things that wouldn't call it a trauma. It's very easy to dismiss it as not relevant and kind of maybe tell yourself inside like, oh, that's just my own problem. Well, that impacted you. It's a little I, and it might be worthy of looking at. And I can even give examples of how that lack of worthiness feeling actually has led me to do very successful things to get achievement in my life. So I get that acknowledgement. It can go overboard, of course, because, the imbalance and workaholism and stuff like that I've also had to deal with. But, you kind of map out all those things, and those are the things that have impacted you in life. Those are the things that have shaped you. Yeah. And then you can decipher them and understand like which of them might be at play, both explicitly and implicitly, in kind of driving your behavior.
Mm-hmm. So powerful on an individual level already, right? Listeners and viewers, already this is so powerful on an individual level. But wait, there's more. If we actually apply this in teams and organizations, right? I love what you say in your book too. You say when you decipher the impacts of your team and an organization, you're better able to understand your culture, overcome hidden barriers to performance, and leverage strengths that take you and your teammates to the next level. So what I think about too is, wouldn't it be amazing if leaders were to actually query their team members? Hey, I know we just laid off 100 people. So last week we had on two guys who did that. That was 1/3 of their workforce, and they did it back in the day when it was really done ugly. And it would be interesting, if you could decipher some of the impacts of things like that in your organization, in your team, and ascertain what that meant for people. In some cases, maybe people said, I'm just going to rise to a higher occasion so it doesn't happen to me. Others could go into full-on fear mode and just go into protection. So I appreciate that you throughout your book take us through where we can use this stuff individually, in teams, in whole organizations.
In the team and organization setting, we hire people based on resumes and based on kind of these formal categories of things that we believe they can do. Well, experiential intelligence suggests that our whole life gives us assets that we can apply to our personal lives, but work lives. So when you're building a team, looking at the spectrum of your team's life experience and the mindsets and abilities that they're bringing to the workplace, and making sure you've got that diverse array of experiences will absolutely give you a leg up. And if you value it and you draw it forth, it creates a culture where people are really playing off of and leveraging each other's strengths in a way that, otherwise might not be possible.
Which is just really exciting to really build vibrant cultures that are on fire. Now we could talk more about mindsets, and if we have time, I'll delve more into that because I know how critical they are. But I do want to talk about reinventing relationships, certainly as we're building a team. And I was blown back by just this simple phrase that you say in your book, that visceral memories engage autopilot responses. We have to dive into that. This is so powerful.
Well, it ties into your previous question in the discussion about those impacts. So one of the things that I realized for a long time, I was working on autopilot, and I wasn't aware of some of these little impacts that would create these visceral reactions. So, an example would be like, I was always worried about judgment because of, my mother's mental illness, and we were kind of in this fringe spiritual community, and I always kind of protected my image. So we're being worried about judgment. So meaning if somebody was going to give me feedback, I'd kind of get tense and worried, and they'd probably come through in my affect. Well, those are, kind of the things that created those events that caused that fear of judgment. Those are visceral memories, meaning they got wired in me. There's a lot of research about trauma getting wired. Those little events also wire you, but a lot of times they fly under the radar because they're not qualified as traumas. They're little things that have shaped us that then kind of give us these little knee-jerk reactions, which if other people are tuned into them, they can kind of they shape our personalities, and they're like, why is he so defensive? And so those visceral memories can get in the way of personal relationships, and also they show up in teams because we're all just people. We come to work. It's hard to leave some part of us at the front door or the home office door. It's just, we bring our whole selves. So the idea that these visceral memories can create these autopilot responses, we really want to get in touch with what are those beliefs we have because of our experiences, and maybe we can change those. What are the feelings those beliefs conjure up? And then what are the behaviors that they lead to? And the more conscious we are of those things through, doing a lot of the techniques we'll talk about, or we've talked about, meditation and, therapy and EMDR and whatever else you might, find valuable. But if you look at beliefs, feelings, and behavior, your own, and then you kind of complete the feedback loop because you look at interactions. Well, other people have beliefs, feelings and behavior based on that interaction. And if you can kind of just map that out and understand the negative feedback loops and turn those into positive loops because you're intervening at that kind of deeper level, that's where you really create, you amplify everybody's experiential intelligence.
Powerful. And then, of course, we have to come back and bring back in Daniel Goleman, because you then talk about the intersection of EQ, emotional intelligence, and XQ, experiential intelligence. And you talk about how emotionally intelligent people are both aware of and able to control their emotions. And as a result, people with high emotional intelligence are better able to temper their autopilot responses. So critical, right? So such an important thing to be able to develop in your personal relationships and certainly at work.
I think we've known for a while that emotional intelligence is important for leadership and for relationships and being in touch with our emotions. And Goleman and others talk about how to be more present with yourself through meditation and through other techniques. And the concept of emotional intelligence, just to put it out there, is it's being in touch with your own emotions and being connected and in touch with other people's emotions as well. And so how do you do that? How do you grow experiential or emotional intelligence? Well, you can do things like I just mentioned, and as you develop greater emotional intelligence and you're in touch with your own emotions, that feedback loop, you've got beliefs and you've got feelings, which are emotions. You can understand I feel what's going on. Okay, what's that belief that's causing that? And so you can intervene behaviorally with yourself also, because those beliefs, if you intervene and understand your feelings, can change your behavior. And so experiential intelligence, if you can go back and kind of understand what made you you through all your experiences, it gives you a leg up on developing your own emotional intelligence. And as you develop your emotional intelligence, it gives you a leg up on being able to look at stuff in a way that is a little bit more grounded and maybe not kind of knee-jerk-ish, so to speak, in terms of being able to get in touch with the things that impacted you. So it's kind of a feedback loop and a great relationship between EQ and XQ.
Mm-hmm. So much there. It's just beautiful. Let's grab our last break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Dr. Soren Kaplan, who's the author of Experiential Intelligence, Harness the Power of Experience for Personal and Business Breakthroughs. We've been talking a bit about discovering our experiential intelligence. After the break, we're going to get into how we can actually assess it. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other bit of news that I want to share with you is that the anthology that I curated, it's called Passionately Striving and Why, is also available. It's a collection of 25 stories of women that I recruited from around the world that tell their intimate story of how they discovered their purpose and are now serving from it. So anywhere from Australia to Zambia, we've got it covered. Hope you'll check that out as well. If you're just joining us today, my guest is Dr. Soren Kaplan. He's an affiliate at USC's Center for Effective Organizations. He's also a serial entrepreneur, a columnist for Inc. magazine, and a former corporate executive, basically your underachiever. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Sorry, I couldn't resist. It's delightful to know you, Soren. I told you, in our exchanges, when I connect with my guests, you can run from me, but you can't hide. I lived in Seattle. I know where Bellingham is. I can get to you. So,
and you called me out on my overachieving, and that is something I've tried to actually work on as well. But thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
It's wonderful. So here, if it weren't enough what we've already covered, which is already so actionable and helpful, you take it one step further, which is genius, and you give us a way to actually assess our experiential quotient. So you've actually created an assessment scale, and it's on your website. So listeners and viewers, you can go to Soren's website and access his materials and actually learn your own experiential quotient. It's fantastic. So you've created this assessment. Can you tell us a little bit about it? And I know there are 4 aspects of it, but you do it better than me.
I want to give credit to Dr. Lindsay Godwin from Champlain College, who's probably one of the foremost thought leaders and practitioners in positive psychology. She's helped me develop this kind of profiler, I guess you could say. What we are not trying to do with it is to give someone a score like an IQ test. What we are trying to do with it is essentially dimensionalize how an individual or a team understands how the experiential intelligence that they possess and leverages it to achieve their goals. And so really what we look at are 4 dimensions: ability, appreciation, recognizing that you have these inherent abilities. And then the second one is impact awareness. We've talked about impacts. So recognizing that stuff has impacted us individually or even organizationally. If you're in teams and, you're getting impacted by other teams in terms of, challenges and taking risks or stifling your innovation, whatever it is, there's impacts that, we want to be able to understand. Mindset flexibility, which basically means that you have an understanding that what you believe today actually may change based on getting more data or having new experiences. And then the concept of amplification, which basically means as you get in touch with all these other things about yourself and your own experiential intelligence, that kind of recognizing that a way to grow your experiential intelligence is to help others grow their experiential intelligence through that kind of positive interaction. And so you look at those 4 dimensions, and there's questions that tie to kind of how you view things, in the present, how you view things about your past, and how you view the future. It's 12 questions. It's super simple, but it really will give you a sense of kind of where you fit in terms of your own experiential intelligence. We kind of have 3 categories based on your score. Are you a kind of aspiring, are you aspirant in terms of your experiential intelligence? Are you kind of an explorer, kind of middle range, or are you really an amplifier at this point where you can help others grow their own experiential intelligence because you're in touch with yours to a certain degree? So, it's simple, but it will help teams and individuals kind of get a read on where they fit. And then they can use those tools, including like a 360 assessment for teams and various discussion guides and templates to kind of up their game even further and take the assessment again and keep at it.
Mm-hmm. It's delightful. There's knowledge is power, right? And so that really brings me to the next piece, is really about the importance of leadership, right? So much of what we talk about on the show is about elevating culture, leadership. And so this notion of, in terms of your own leadership being more effective, if you're deliberate about what you draw upon from your own experience, you can be so much more effective. But first you got to understand, how it forms your mindset and your behaviors and how you respond. So I think it's really important, and I certainly, part of the reason I guess I have to say that I have work is because we all have to keep working at this, right? And we need help usually. So, but I really appreciate how you talk about and distinguish how really getting a handle on this as leaders, your experiential intelligence is so critical.
It is critical. And there's a big self-awareness component to experiential intelligence. There's also a component as a leader around, and I talked about amplification, around identifying and understanding those that you're working with and leading, and drawing out the experiential intelligence of those that you're connected to, so that you can achieve your common goals. A lot of it is from a leadership standpoint, that self-awareness, but also really being able to connect dots in your own life so that you can see the experiential intelligence you've developed, connect dots for other people, help them. A lot of it is also about understanding your beliefs and kind of deciphering kind of the unwritten rules that guide you. But like any industry and business models and innovation, innovators challenge unwritten rules. So you apply it to yourself, but then, you can then apply it better to how you compete and how you go to market, because you're continuing to apply those things as you doing for yourself to whatever you're doing out there in the world. So those are just some principles around how to look at kind of that individualized dimension of experiential intelligence, and as a leader, then applying it to the organization as well as the market.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then the more leaders are able to better understand their own experiential intelligence, then they are more adept at being able to really call out what's special and unique in their team members. Like, do you know that you actually are your first person that always comes up with the creative ways of going through something impossible? Are you aware that you do that? It's magical, right? Imagine working for a leader like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because leaders, if you kind of imagine kind of that purview that leaders have, leaders are usually managing networks of people, networks of partners, whatever it may be. And a leader's job is to understand the strengths that every node in that network, every individual, every partner brings to the party, so that you can achieve your goals, whatever they may be. And so that leadership with experiential intelligence means you're applying it yourself, but you're really looking at the assets that other people bring that might not be written down. It might not be on that resume. It might not be listed in the technology competencies of your partner. They're the things that really make people themselves and kind of give them their own strengths. And it's up to the leader to kind of help decipher that and bring that out and kind of help everyone understand it so everybody can play off of each other, and you build great teams that way as well.
Well, let's bring it home then. So if we can here for our listeners and viewers, because what you talk about in your organizational XQ chapter here, you say if you really want to infuse greater XQ into your organization's culture, you can use 4 key strategies. Can we talk about those? I want to leave our listeners with that.
So the one thing that makes change are experiences. When we have, you could read a book, but that's why I made my book actually active, so to speak. So you want to create experiences for people. You want to, create, do things that enliven what your purpose is and give people opportunities for learning, et cetera, et cetera. You want to develop people's abilities through those experiences. You want to scale the experiential intelligence in your organization by having people who are good at stuff, like kind of help other people learn through codifying best practices or, mentoring, things like that. And then you want to foster those positive relationship loops. You want to look at the teams and the groups that are really working well, see why they're working well, and help amplify some of those best practices to other teams as well. So that's really the essence of it.
Powerful way to finish the show. So I'm really happy to know you. I was grateful that you taught me what you did through your book, and thrilled to share with my listeners and viewers across the world. Thank you for being on Working on Purpose.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you, Elise.
You're welcome. Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Soren Kaplan, his books or his work, just start by going to his personal website. It's sorenkaplan.com. So that's SorenKaplan.com, Soren Kaplan. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch up via recorded podcast. We were on the air with Mohammed Anwar and Frank Donna of Softway and Culture Plus. We talked about their book, Love as Business Strategy, and they shared their very intimate story of their own incredible cultural transformation from distrust and disconnection to love, and the powerful business results they obtained as a result. It is a ringing endorsement for the enormity culture wields and what can be done through evolved and committed leadership to steward it for purpose and profit. Next week, we'll be on the air with Paul Magnoni, who is the co-author of Decisions Over Decimals, Striking the Balance Between Intuition and Information. And remember, work is an integral and important part of our lives. It can be one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.